Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Today, I am with Judy Bradt, and she is the CEO of Summit Insight. How are you this morning, Judy?
I am relaxed and so happy to have a conversation with you and to meet your community. So thanks for inviting me.
Yes, we've been talking about this over a month, trying to see how we can get together. So this works for us today. Cool. So, what I would like to do is to go ahead and introduce you to my guest, Judy Bradt. Judy is an expert and brings to you a lot of secrets to winning government contracts, and she's going to share her expertise this morning. She is also a strategic advisor in the government market. Basically, she helps her clients to understand what is the best strategy for them to win government contracts. And she's going to share a lot of her tips this morning. And we're also going to talk about the second edition of her book, okay? Government Contracts Made Easier, okay? And we're going to dive in to talk more about some of the things that she advises her clients on. And so, Judy, before we talk or get into the session, I want to find out when you're not working, okay? What are some fun things that you like to do and to give your time to?
I thought about this morning. Well, I'm an adventurer and I love to explore the world. And so I'm an instrument rated private pilot. I love to scuba dive. But I thought, what did I actually put on when I got up this morning? I'm going hiking. I'm a Virgo. We're an earth sign.
Me too.
And so land, air, and sea, I love them all. When I'm not trying to stay home and stay safe from a pandemic, I'm also a professional indoor rock climbing instructor. And so being out walking in nature's, I think one of those has been one of my go-to sanity things during pandemic, and as well as a wonderful way to stay connected with people safely from time to time. So I have to actually fess up and say that all of these other adrenaline related sports, I think my soul connection is hiking, walk in the woods, but especially by a stream. I'm drawn to the walk that takes me near the water.
Yes. I did not know you were a Virgo. I'm a Virgo too. So anything outdoors, nature, I love. So we have that in common. That's pretty cool. Like that. So let's go ahead and dive into, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions because I really want the audience to get to know more about your book and more about the services that you offer. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into the book. And so the first thing that I want to find out, and my audience would like to know about you, is just tell us a little bit about your background, your company, and what is your why? What is it that you love about the service that you offer your customers?
I've come to realize that the core of my work is around the art of human connection in the federal arena. And I came to that almost accidentally. I almost backed into it. When I graduated from business school, I wanted to be a strategist. And IBM Canada, which I was living in Canada, I'm from Canada, was hiring business grads hand over fist. And I said, I want to be a strategist. They said, great, we can hardly wait. It took me 6 months to realize that I was employed by the planet's largest sales organization. And I was so horrified that I literally left the country. I left my home and native land. I left my parents, the computer industry, my friends, my family, threw everything in a U-Haul, got married, and drove to Washington, D.C. and started work at the Canadian Embassy in 1988, where over the next 15 years, I cut my teeth on becoming a subject matter expert in U.S. federal acquisition. And I helped over 5,000 Canadian companies win over $200 billion of federal contracts under the trade agreements. In 2003, I left the embassy, stayed in the Washington, D.C. area, and started my company, Summit Insight, and grew my practice from there. I started out working with Canadian companies, but realized there were plenty of American business owners that I could be helping as well. I've had some turning points, some big painful lessons learned in that time. But I will tell you that the thing that I spent 25 years running from, sales, came and figuratively body slammed me and took me hostage so I couldn't escape. And that ended up being something not only that I had to learn, but sales wasn't what I thought it was. And it became the core of my practice because I realized nobody should have the painful experience I had. This can be easier. And that's also why my book is called Government Contracts Made Easier, because easy is fiction.
And since you mentioned that, this is a great segue for us to take a deeper dive into the book. It's a great read, and I also had an opportunity to take a read through the book. But basically, for me, I thought it laid out a blueprint to tell you, these are some of the successful strategies if you want to get into this industry, and if this is what you want to do. Here's some of the successful strategies and how you go about doing it. One of the things that I wanted to find out is that I know that this is a second edition, but why did you decide that you wanted to write a second edition of this book?
Well, the funny thing was that the book lays out 7 steps that even 10 years ago when I wrote the first edition, that was based on what I had known and wanted to bring together. The first edition, I was turning 50 and was starting to forget things. And I thought, why don't I write everything down before it all exits my head? And so it took me some time to kind of bring together 7 things: strategy, focus, process, competition, relationships, teaming, sales, and marketing, and put them together in an orderly way, bring a lot of stuff together in one place that people struggle with and find, and it takes them a long time to figure out these parts. And so over 10 years, systems change and rules change. Those were the biggest ostensible things that changed. The other thing that changed was that I changed. I'll show you what I mean. The first edition, and here's the biggest difference. The first edition, I'm on the cover. Second edition, you're on the cover.
Yes.
That was the biggest thing that I learned. In some ways, it wasn't. If I were to start a book that I wanted to write all over again, I would write a different book. Everything that I've got in this one is tremendously important. But I thought I couldn't bear to have a book out there that had my name on it and had things that were inaccurate when the principles were really important. So I plodded through and got this done, and it did something I didn't expect.
What's that?
It gave me the chance to connect with literally a whole new generation of people in the federal market. It also meant that I have more friends. My friend Josh Frank taught me what's the secret sauce to going and being an Amazon #1 bestseller, and showed me how to do that. And that's that extra little sparkle that makes people go, ooh. It helps me reopen the dialogue. It let me sharpen my edge just a little bit. And it also left me thinking, I don't really want to say what's the next book. But it re-energized me and gave me the opportunity to meet more friends. But basically, it's a good book. It's a great book. Thousands of companies have. Here's the thing. The second best thing about writing a book is autographing books.
True. Yes.
The best thing, you're an author, right?
Yes. Yes.
The best thing, tell me if this is true. The best thing about writing a book is when somebody comes to you with the book and it's dog-eared and written on and highlighted, and someone says, this helped me change my life for the better. That's the best part about writing a book. And that happens.
Yeah. And pouring out, the lessons that you've learned or solutions that you've come to know, and how you can share those solutions to help companies or individuals to look at how they can use your tool to help them to get to that next level or that next step based on their plan or their strategy. So yes, signing the book, that's for me is heartfelt, because I know that someone has taken the time to read the book, and what I said in the book is very helpful. They found it to be helpful. So yes, signing a book is good. But I want to back up a little bit and talk about, and I don't know, when you said conversations, I don't know whether this has been a conversation for you this year, but with the pandemic, a lot of companies that operate primarily in the commercial market, they lost a lot of business. And I've had a lot of conversations where people that I met several years ago, they said, no, I don't want to be bothered with government contracting. It's to this, it's to that, and that kind of stuff. But I've had a lot of those same people to come back to me and say, Renzi, I've been looking at what's going on in the federal market, and it looked like, the market is there, that it really didn't close down. So, is it still time for me to diversify my portfolio? Have you had those conversations during this time to say what companies did or were interested in doing to look at their business to be more resilient? But also, is this a time to pivot or to diversify their business portfolio? Have you had those kind of conversations?
We have those conversations all the time. And here's what I'll tell you about that. Companies that have been successful, there's research done, and companies that have been successful in the federal arena, they were surveyed for what exactly is it? What's the driving force, the motivation for their involvement in the federal market? And the kinds of things that people say bring them to the federal market include, hey, the government prints the money. How hard can this be? The government has to award contracts to small business. I'm all about that. I want my share. Or, hey, I need to diversify and level out my cash flow. None of these is the reason that successful companies cite for being in the market. The enduring reasons, the thing that keeps people going. Because there are a lot of places where your business could meet customers, make money, and thrive. Federal contracting is hard. If you're going to be in it, one of two things at least have to be true. First, you have a product, a service, or expertise that a federal buyer needs to do their work. And the other is that the time and effort it takes to win federal business, the plan to grow your business through federal contracting is aligned with the mission and purpose that you have for your company and your plans to grow the company. Those are the two. And if those are not your driving reasons, I encourage you to take a step back. Chapter 1 of my book, which is about strategy, the market entry decision, that's free. I give that away on my website because I want you to make a good decision. You couldn't pay me enough money to drag you and persuade you to try to pursue federal contracting. I was talking yesterday to a group of Procurement Technical Assistance Center counselors. I was providing training to their national association. And as part of that, honestly, I wanted to lure them to come because I was offered an online presentation slot at 1:15 in the afternoon on a Friday. Went, oh, good, thanks a lot. So I marketed. I put out 2 waves of emails saying, tell me what the big reasons are. What do companies tell you are the reasons why they struggle to be successful in federal contracting? And why do you think they don't pick up the phone and make the call? And I got responses back from counselors. And now my PhD wannabe went at it and did a little bit of analysis. And when I looked at the responses, 35% of the reasons people gave fell into the category, if I had to broadly sum it up, no strategic fit or just not ready for this market. 65% of the responses for why they struggle, why the counselors think they struggle, came back to need better sales skills.
Yes. And it really is. And I think a lot of people don't realize this is that whether you have your certifications or whether you don't have certifications, I get people to tell me, okay, Renzi, I have my certification. So now what? And so the now what is your business development strategy? And speaking of that, when we talk about, and I think you've kind of touched on this, but let's go back and revisit this. When we talk about the facts of what it takes to be a successful company in the federal market, what are those tips that you offer them to say, these are the things that you need to be mindful of if you're making a decision to get into this market?
Companies that are successful, I've learned, and especially after I had a real crucible experience in 2015, because there were some things that after having written a book and literally created well over 1 million PowerPoint slides and talked to thousands of companies. It boils down to this. People who are successful all do 4 things. First, learn the federal sales game. What to do, what to say, and what to ask with the players at all 5 layers that you need to have relationships with when you want to be successful. That's the first part. The second part is focus. Make a confident decision based on hard data that shows you who buys what you do, and concentrate all of your relationship building right there. Big mistake people make is everybody in the government needs what I do. That's nice, but everybody is not your customer.
Exactly.
And the federal government is a gift for people who like research, and lots of people who are really tremendous subject matter experts actually have an inner data geek that thrives when they realize how much free information there is that can help them make a decision about where to focus. So first, the sales game. Second, focus. Third thing people need to do when they're successful is build a structured federal sales plan around just the federal humans in your target agencies who buy what you do. There's a structured way to build relationships, one small interaction at a time. And the fourth thing, because I'd been doing these 3 steps after I kind of had my crucible moment with over 50 or 60 companies. And nobody ever said this is a stupid plan, it doesn't work. But an unacceptable number, which is to say more than 0, said to me, this was tactically brilliant. I didn't do the work. I got to own that. It's a timeout. How do we fix that? And so I went back, I took about all my programs, and I piloted not 1, not 3, but 5 different programs. I nearly lost my mind as well as my shirt, and put it all back on the shelf and said, what did we learn? The fourth step, use the plan. How hard is that? It is hard. It is a long ride from October 1st to September 30th. You get nothing. Oh, good, we won. But if you can't see you're on track, you're in that place that my friend Mike Osredker was when my conversation with him was what motivated me to do the first book. It was lovely, elegant man, so kindly, was sent out from Kansas by his human capital firm to win federal business. And he kept coming to the same networking thing every week. And he sat down with me over coffee. He said, Judy, he said, selling to the federal government is like swimming in the ocean with no mileposts. I went,
oh, wow.
We can make
an analogy.
We can make that better. And so using the plan, having a methodical way that keeps you engaged and gives you the sense, where are the markers? How do you know you're making progress? And so we redesigned all of our programs. So honestly, you can see what progress looks like. You get that same, that dopamine hit from all those tiny wins that my clients learn to notice. Oh, that worked. Oh, that was another one. Can I tell you a quick story about what makes the difference between noticing and not noticing?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. One of my clients, Barbara, called me up in a panic. She said, my life is over. I did everything you said, and I can never go back to this agency again. The most horrible thing is how I said, Barbara, okay, tell me what happened. Breathe. I said, well, look at this email I got I was responding, I was following up to a sources sought, and I get this email back from the contracting officer. We are not responding to inquiries from industry at this time. I'm dead. I said, oh, Barbara, no, this is wonderful. She said, it is? I said, yeah. Barbara, you just got something that hundreds of companies would love to have. Do you know what it was? Any idea what it was, Renzi?
Well, did she get a letter? Did she get a letter from the contracting officer?
She got a response from a contracting officer. How great was that? Said, Renzi, you're in conversation. You get to dance. This is a win. This is a plus. Then you can say, oh, I just want to follow proper protocol. What's yours? When is a good way and time to get back in touch with you? That's actually engagement, not disengagement. And so being able to understand that and keep things rolling is the fourth thing. So those 4 things, understand the sales game, focus, create a structured relationship building plan. So you're meeting and building relationships with your players at all the layers, and use the plan. Exactly. Those are the 4 biggies.
Along with what you say too, I think it helps to know 2 things. I love the fact that you said focus, because if you're not careful, it can feel like Alice in Wonderland, that you're chasing everything. And like you say, there are a lot of companies that are agencies that buy what you you sell, but can you sell to everybody? Okay. I think it's so important that you choose 2 to 3 companies that you want to develop a relationship with, you want to develop a rapport. And I think I saw somewhere in your book is understand your customer, is do the research, understand your customer, understand what those keywords are. So when you're having a conversation, it's not a generic kind of conversation that you're having with them, but you want to, I call it key, drop some keywords in your conversation and let them know that you've done your research. I think that's important. The other thing I think that is so important also when you talk about, the level of focus. Focus is so, so, so important because sometimes I find people who are coming to this industry, one of the things that they want to do is cast a wide net. I liken that to throwing spaghetti on the wall. Something will stick. If I throw enough out there, something will stick. But I also look at it in terms of momentum. If your energy and your focus is so dispersed, would you have higher probability to win and develop that rapport by focusing your effort? Or if you're so dispersed, would you kind of react to whatever's coming across your path, like cars speeding by, as opposed to saying part of your plan is that your plan is to figure out who you want to do business with, focus and build that momentum. And when you build the momentum, you build traction.
Yes,
yes. I love that. Love that.
I'll tell you 2 stories. One situation, first of all, if you're thinking about the federal market and some well-meaning person, maybe your procurement technical assistance center or a friend, sends you a notice for something that's set aside for a company like yours, and there's less than 30 days to go, and you don't know the buyer, and you don't know the budget, and you don't know the incumbent, and you don't know the history, your odds of winning are in the single digits. Don't do that. The most valuable thing you can do if it looked so good and you're finding out about it so late is peel out the contact information and start to build out do I know anybody here? Who are the players at all the layers? And how can I start to make friends with them? Because that person who's buying that thing now, the federal government very rarely buys one thing once and they don't ever buy it again. That person starts to be a clue, a lead. Now, one of my early clients, I cherish this story and this guy, Navy veteran, Neil Wilson. He's in Florida. Gator Engineering he's an aquifer engineer. And he was really frustrated. He said, I spent a whole year going to Florida and Georgia and Alabama and Louisiana. And all of these people said, we love service disabled veterans. We have to award contracts to veteran owned businesses. I spent $65,000. That was my budget for the whole year. I got nothing. I got the goose eggs. I said, all right, Neil, let's take it apart. All right. First of all, you are spread so far and so wide. You're a mile wide and an inch deep. None of these people know you're alive. And all the people you know are mostly small business specialists. Small business specialists are not your buyer. So let's take this apart. Really close to you, we have Kennedy Space Flight Center, and we have Veterans Affairs, and we've got one other office. All right. Let's take the cards from those people, put them in your A pile, take all the other cards, put them in another stack, pat them on the head and say, we'll be back to you. It's okay. I won't forget you. So don't let your business cards mumble at you in the night. And they do that. They do that too.
Yes, they do.
and so now, and then go back and really concentrate your efforts there. And he called me up later and said, well, there's this thing at Veterans Affairs and they're interested and they invited me to bid. I said, well, great, off you go. And he called me back a few weeks later, said, I bid and I lost. I said, well, Neil, did you get a debriefing? He said, a what? I said, a debriefing.
Exactly.
You put time and effort into that proposal and you have standing. That means you can ask them for follow-up and feedback.
Exactly.
He said, oh, and off you went. Months later, he said, well, here's what I learned. They said, we loved your bid. You were a fresh face, great, so talented. There were a couple of things that needed to be better in your proposal. Here's the kinds of things to look at. Why don't you bid this other thing? And that was the one he won. And
Fantastic.
fast forward years later, Neil is now one of the leaders in the Society of American Military Engineers, and he's an accomplished federal contractor. He and his wife, Julie, have grown their business, and Neil returned the favor to me. And just a little over a year ago, invited me to dinner to meet the executive director of the Society of American Military Engineers, Joe Schrodel. And we had just the loveliest kind of full circle of really, in some ways, him mentoring me, him introducing me to a really wonderful guy at the head of an association that I've also gotten to speak to and join. So there you go.
Yeah, and I love your story because a couple of things you taught Neil to do. First and foremost, play in your own backyard. There are so many federal agencies that are located nationwide. I advise my client, let's start here in our own backyard and see, those agencies that may be close by in the state. And so it's easier to get to them versus, is it necessary for you to travel to DC to do one of those outreach events? Weigh your odds there. The second thing I love about what you did and advised Neil is that always ask for a debriefing. It's so important that people in this space understand how to win and what is a winning strategy, even when you lose, because you want to know what you did well, and that's what you did, you want to continue to do. But that, if you did not do so well or you didn't score so high in other areas, those are the areas that you want to focus on. Take a look at your strategy or take a look at your content, because if you never ask for a debriefing, you won't know. You don't know what you did well. You don't know what you didn't do so well.
And you don't know how close you got. You might have lost by just a small technicality. It may be that the one that they had to award the work to actually would have rather had you. That happens, but you're not going to know that unless you get a debriefing of some kind. Now, there are rules about debriefings. You'll read about those too.
Yeah.
You have to know the rules. But whether it's a formal debriefing or just post-competition feedback, a lot of the time, if you did a good job, they actually want to teach you how to be successful. But you're not going to know that till you keep building the relationship and show up. Sometimes what they need a couple of times is they need what you call a loser bid. They need a bid for the file. Sometimes for them, that's a win, that you just simply bid at all. But you're not going to know that till you stay engaged, which is another reason why focus is your friend. You get that return on investment. You hear about advertising, repetition, repetition, repetition. It's very different from throw spaghetti at the wall. You keep showing up somewhere. There's a sweet spot. And this goes for competition as well as relationship building between apathy and pestilence. It's you're calling up every day saying, got something, got something, got something, got something, go away. But having a really diverse winning strategy for building a relationship, you're bringing somebody something. When you talked about what's it take to do the homework. People say, do your homework. You want to pull your hair out. That's why I don't have any hair now. No, people say, do your homework. And here's how that starts. First of all, the federal agencies all have websites. If you don't have time to learn about your federal customer, they sure as heck do not have time to learn about you.
Exactly.
So they expect that you have read all their stuff before you show up. So you're not only looking at their overall website, but their wiring diagram, their components, their organization. How are they organized? Nobody does business with the federal government. Exactly. There's no such thing as doing business with the federal government or with Homeland Security or the FBI. There's only doing business with federal humans. And so those individual components have missions. They have responsibilities. The agency publishes. You asked about how do they know the language. Every agency has a strategic acquisition plan. It's published. Go look at that thing.
Yeah. And speaking of public acquisition plan, what about how do you advise your clients on how to use the forecast? Because, when we talk about building relationships, understanding, how to play the game, how do you advise your clients on how to use the forecast?
To go forward, look back. If you think about a pie, okay, if you draw a picture of a pie and split it into 4 quadrants, okay, and so normally we start sort of right to left. So the sort of upper right-hand quadrant, you've got Congress sends out the money and the money gets approved. And then you get acquisition forecasts and requirements are developed. Then you get the pre-solicitation and requests for information, sources sought, things that are leading up to the forecast, leading up to the competition. Then you get the competition. Happens, there's a contract award, there are protests, the protests are resolved, there's performance. And finally, the last quadrant, there's contract data. There's the record of all the things that happen. Most people start at the top end and look at the congressional funding and the flow and the forecasts and blah, blah, blah. To go forward, start by looking back. Start with past federal contract data. We have no shortage of enormous flows of email notices, bid boards, databases. There's what I call opportunity illusion. Yes. Way back in the olden days, the only way the formal publication of record for federal acquisition was the Commerce Business Daily, published by the Department of Commerce, came out daily on flimsy yellow or white newsprint and 3-point type. It's why I have corrective eyewear. Okay. Yeah. But now fast forward, and we're flooded with this stuff. It looks like there's so much opportunity, and yet it's harder than ever, more overwhelming than ever to find stuff. And here's why. You and I are both wearing glasses, right? Yes. We've had the experience where we sit in the optometrist's office in front of that big, huge thing with all the lenses. And they go, better A or B, flip. Better A or B, flip. Better A or, I can see. Yeah. And you have this experience and suddenly everything lights up and you can see the opportunities that are just perfect for you. And that happens with federal contracting. When you stop asking the question, what can I bid? And you start looking at who's my buyer, that changes everything. So flip the lens, start asking who's my buyer, build the story of who's going to be involved in that buy. And that makes all the difference. I went off on a story. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. You did. But I have a question for you. If I have anyone who is listening and they're contemplating, to diversify their portfolio by, getting into this market here, give them some insight as to the level of investment. When we talk about investment, because you hear this all the time, you have to be willing to invest.
Yep.
So if you could give this audience or people who are thinking about getting into this market, what would you tell them in terms of investment?
Here's what to expect. If the big myth about success in federal contracting is, I'm going to, again, think about the cycle. I'm going to win a contract and then I'm going to have some more money and then I'm going to be able to invest and grow my federal business. No. You start by investing and then you win a little. You think about how much comes in consulting, for example. The industry standard is you have maybe 30% of profit, and that's gross profit at the end, some of which you have to reinvest in your business. So that let's say that $100,000 win or that $1 million win you get at the end of all of that, then you have death and taxes at the end of that. So that's not exactly a huge fund of capital. Baby needs new shoes. There's things to do with that money. So you've got to be able to have a capital infusion up front. Now, how much is that? Research shows that companies spend anywhere from $30,000 to $233,000 over a 12-month period on federal sales and business development and investing to win that business. And so in order to play in the game, you not only have to invest money, and here you talk about capital, and I think about it this way. There's traditional and then the kind of capital you forget about. You have financial capital. You have financial capital, you have human capital, you have technical capital, you have temporal capital, time, and you have emotional capital, resilience, and really guts in the game. You have to be able to have extra of all of those to invest. If in your business you are already running at over 80% of capacity and resources, it's a kind of a rule of thumb. If you're running the machine at over 80% of capacity, the wheels are going to be falling off real soon. If you have over 80% of disk utilization on your computer, if you weren't paying attention, you do not want to be in the middle of giving the big presentation and all the lights go down on the machine. You got to be looking for where am I at capacity now. I mean, I have Where is it? Here it is. I have my magical contracting fairy wand. All right. I'm going to grant you the contract of your dreams.
Mhm.
Now, do you ever remember that fairy tales have a catch, right? You get the contract of your dreams if you have the stuff, the staff, the space, the servers to perform right now. So you got to think about where's the normal distribution curve of the contracts you do every day. What size of contract could you perform 5 or 6 of them? Easy like breathing right now in your backyard. You have everything you need, all the financing, all the stuff. That's the kind of level of confidence your federal buyer wants to have in you. Not, oh, just award me the contract. I'm going to go and my brother-in-law's got a server. I'm going to hire some relatives and my nephew, he'd be great at that. No. Okay. You got to be ready that your federal buyer wants to know that you've solved their problem for someone who looks just like them yesterday afternoon. That's a starting point. Okay.
And you alluded to something, because when we talk about, your strategy and everything, share your insight when we talk about teaming. When we look at teaming or subcontracting, I don't talk too much about joint ventures, because to me, joint ventures are kind of like a marriage. You want to be careful who you're married to. But like
teaming is too. Large, people talk about teaming and they think about teaming with the large primes. The biggest misunderstanding about the large primes is that the large primes have to do business with small business. It's parallel misunderstanding to the government has to do business with small business. The reason why you've got a small business subcontracting requirement that the primes have if the prime contract is worth more than $700,000. And the law and regulation also requires large companies to have a supplier diversity program. Now, if a law requires it, think about it. You're a large corporation. You want to minimize risk. You don't want to be in trouble with the law. Their small business office, typically, that's a cost center. Almost always, the small business office reports to compliance. All right. And so if they have a legal requirement to be doing business with small business, do you think they're ever on any day at risk for falling short of that goal? No, they have plenty. It's very rare. Now, they have to work really hard at making sure that when small businesses become large, they have new suppliers. But they are not hurting for small suppliers by and large. So the typical dance that happens is that small business goes to large business and says, hi, we'd like to be your subcontractor and supplier. The supplier diversity rep says, great, thanks. Put your capability statement here and upload it into our portal. Small business says, great. What do we do? Oh, we'll call you. Crickets. Okay. Reset, new conversation. Hi, we've just been over to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia, and they say they're going to die if they don't have this thing. Want to talk? Totally changes the game. That's going to get your call returned. That's seductive.
Exactly.
Okay. You have to bring business, and that means you not only have to bring capability, but again, past performance. And I use past performance in a very broad term. Some people think it's past performance as with a federal agency. Show that you have done the work of solving a problem of similar size and scale and type and mission for a marquee name client or organization that your prospect is going to recognize. Then you have the beginning of a conversation. Because if they've never met you before, no matter how bright the smile, no matter how firm the handshake, no matter how big your company, if they have never heard of you, the minute you walk through the door, all they see is a great big ball of risk. They don't like risk.
Exactly. I call that unknown commodity. Who buys an unknown commodity? Who? We don't. At least I don't, But, and you alluded to something else, is that when we think about, contracting, one of the things we talk about all the time is past performance. Well, what if I've never, performed a federal contract? Not having that past performance, is that a negative point against me? How do I overcome the fact that I may not have performed a federal contract? But how do I overcome that to say that I can be as competitive as, someone else who's pursuing the same interests or the same contract opportunity as I?
If you're answering the question about past performance by filling out a box on a form, if you're doing a proposal that is what I call writing novels for strangers, you're already behind. By the time you actually make a proposal, you want to have had conversations with your buyers, your end users, your contracting officers to get them feeling comfortable with the experience that you have had providing expertise, products, and services to organizations like theirs. At that point, they have the ability to shape the way that they describe the past performance or experience that they want a bidder to have in a way that cracks the door open for you. Something to look at when you're going, hey, should I bid this thing or not? Look at the past performance requirements. And if for some reason that looks really, really specific, first of all, must have done solar roofs less than 15 miles from where this organization is going to be having a requirement. I'm going, that isn't me. That requirement may have been crafted with someone else in mind.
That
on the other hand, that can be you.
Yes.
And so you shouldn't be guessing. And so that's why you need to start the conversations early so people get genuinely excited about your experience and past performance and can crack the door to let you in, to make it easier to let you float to the top to be one of their top choices. So past performance does not necessarily have to be with another federal agency or with that federal agency. Federal contracting is an extremely challenging place to play if you're a startup and you have not been a government employee recently doing the thing you want to do. And you're not just recently, and I know some of your clients and prospects and community are like this, you're not just exiting a large prime where you're the only one in the company that has this really special whiz-bang skill that this particular client really loves. That's one of the few instances where as a startup, you may be in a good position to not only be a subcontractor, but build a company. And there's a story for another day. There's a big difference between being a technician and being a business owner. Two big decisions. Do you just really want to be 1099ing or ultimately an employee of somebody else? Or do you have all the stuff it takes to build a company? Those are two completely different experiences. And I love that you help your clients figure out what journey are you on.
Exactly. And it's important. You have to decide on, what type of company you want. Do you want a company that, you're doing B2G, it's more of an enterprise, or you want to keep it simple to say, no, I want to be a 1099 or sole proprietor and have that flexibility in terms of being small. There's advantages, but you have to figure out what those advantages are for you. And so I want to segue, because you're a business owner. You're a business owner just like I am. And when I got started, I know that I made a couple of fatal mistakes, things that I wished I had known that I didn't know. So if you had to go back and take a look at you when you got started, share with the audience one fatal mistake you made and the lessons learned from that mistake.
I've got what I call my $1 million mistake. And nobody who's listening here should ever have to go through that experience and forego that $1 million. I talked about when I had left IBM Canada, came down to the United States, and I wanted to avoid everything to do with sales. Absolutely not. My mistake was not understanding that sales is the art of human relationships. I like people. I care about people. And I did not understand what real sales expertise is. Real sales expertise is caring exquisitely for the people that you're in relationship with, that you're doing business with. And failure to understand that left me, I almost lost my company because in 2014, I got the project of my dream. My business had kind of slogged along. I'd always paid my bills, hadn't been terribly profitable. And then I had the big contract. Ever have one of these, Renzi? I bet you have. I bet lots of your listeners have, where big chunk of work up front, and then it's just kind of sailing for the rest of the next 10 months, right? It was going to be.
Yes.
I was, they're nice. They're real, they're unicorns, but they're real sweet contracts. I thought this was going to be it. This was the biggest contract my company had ever done. I was going to be working with 7 companies for a whole year. I had enough margin to bring on somebody to do the parts I didn't really know how to do terribly well, but that was okay. And so we got to the end of the big 2-month heavy lifting part because we were going to build their sales plan, teach them the sales game, get them going. And then I was going to coach them for 10 months as they followed the instructions and made the calls. And finished the call and instead of Friday after, okay, good luck. Happy selling. Talk to you Monday. They said, great. When are you making the introductions? I said, the what? They said, the introduction. But no. They said, yes. I said, no. I said, yep. I went through shock and anger and denial and all the stages of grief. And at the end of all of that, I just had to pick up my big girl socks and open my sales plan and pick up the phone. It was horrible. I was on the hook for thousands of calls, hundreds of introductions for 40 weeks. And these companies were selling everything from city block size generators to uninterruptible power supplies, snap lock glass food containers, and waterless shampoo, and my favorite, root canal equipment. I was dialing for dollars for endodontics.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Call after call after call. Now, I only had 3 problems at this point. First, I have a graduate degree. I don't do sales. Yeah, well, that ship had sailed. Second, I was terrified that people would realize I was a big fat fraud because I didn't know how to do that one thing, how to sell.
Yeah.
But the third thing was, this was my contract for the whole year. In the words of the immortal Gene Kranz, mission controller of Apollo 13, failure was not an option. So I just had to keep slogging, and it was horrible, and call after call after call. And then came the day I had this conversation with Dr. Ned Robertson, the endodontist with the Indian Health Service in Penobscot, Maine. This is our 3rd or 4th conversation. Dr. Ned's telling me about his nephew who just got accepted into medical school at Georgetown. He was so proud of him. And he was telling me what he was doing on his Tuesday off. He was sewing curtains.
Oh, wow.
And by the way, those guys at BNL Biotech, no problem. They'll take a call. Just set up the appointment. And he hung up the phone and went, that was it. That was, how did I do that? How do I do that again? And the months droned on, and thousands of introductions, thousands of calls, hundreds of lot more reporting I'm ever going to do later. I said, all right, I'm done. I'm not telling a single soul I know. Wait a second. I cannot be the only person who's got lots of technical expertise and struggles with this one thing. Because when you realize what it is, nobody should take 12 months to figure this out. And in fact, failure to understand what it took to build relationships, I look back at the struggles my business had to that point, and failure to understand what sales was has cost me easily $1 million of foregone income and business success I could have had if only I had understood that I had, like Dorothy in the Ruby Slippers, I already had everything in me that I needed to go to the place that I'd always wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so
that was a valuable lesson you learned.
That's why I have the magic wand. I teach people how to use their Ruby Slippers.
Yeah. But this has been a pleasure, absolute pleasure. And I really appreciate us finally having the time to do this. And any last words? If people want to reach out to you, how do they get in contact with you?
Connect with me on LinkedIn and write Renzi in the connection note. Please send me a connection. Don't just hit the button. Walk your talk. You can also write me at Judy, Judy.Bradt, Bradt at growfedbiz.com. You can book a conversation. I've got lots of free stuff on my website, lots of free events and webinars. Let's get to know each other and find out if we are a fit to work together.
And if they want to purchase a copy of your book, where do they find your book? governmentcontractsmadeeasier.com. There's a book and a workbook. Folks love both of those. I can't work with everybody. I choose to keep my business really small. I'm going to work with 20 company teams this year. That's it. My clients are what I call triple fives. You've been in business more than 5 years. You got more than 5 million in revenue. You've got at least 5 people in the company who are not 100% billable and are working on some aspect of sales and BD. If at least 2 of those 3 things are true, great. But otherwise, the book and the workbook, thousands of companies use them every day and say, this has been great. It's kept us on track and given us the path to our wins. Thank you, Judy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And also, for anyone who's listening or watching this video, You will also receive additional information that will be in the description that will tell you also how to reach out to Judy as well. So thank you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
It's been a joy, Renzi.
Yes.
Be well. Keep putting good into the world and helping the people you help be successful. Bravo to you.
Thank you. Take care.